All right.
Welcome, everyone. This is Rachel M. Colby with Tattoo It on Your Heart, inviting you to another in my series of interviews with law enforcement officers from around the country. Today, I have the honor of introducing you to Chief Scott Young. He started out in 1983 in Barrington, New Hampshire, and retired as chief after 20 years. But apparently he couldn't stay away because currently he's back serving in Barrington, New Hampshire. So welcome,
Thank
Chief
you.
Young.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Oh, thank you for being a part of this. We're honored. Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Sure. So I've been married for over 30 years. My wife, Melanie, and I live in Stafford, New Hampshire, and we have 5 children, 4 boys and a girl, and we have 10 grandchildren. So we have a pretty big family, and 2 of my sons are police officers, right here, local. We come from a law enforcement family. My brother is a police officer, is a lieutenant on a local police department here. And to go back a little bit, my grandfather was a police chief in the town that I grew up in. Along with, I have an uncle who was a retired state trooper. So we go way back to the 1930s and 1940s in law enforcement, and we've got kind of a second, third generation right now with me and my brother, and then now my boys. So it's pretty cool. We all work in the same county, which is kind of funny. So it's not unusual for all 4 of us to be in different towns, but all 4 of us being on duty at the same time. So we can hear each other on the radio and hear what they're doing and watch what they're doing. So it's pretty cool. I'm glad that I stuck around after I retired for at least a little while, so I could see my boys coming up through the ranks.
That is very unusual, and I'd say, wow, what a gift your family is.
Yeah, well, thank you. And my dad was on the fire side. He was was a firefighter his whole life, and my oldest brother is a retired firefighter. So Thanksgiving was always interesting, and with the cops against the firefighters, and a lot of good fun times ribbing each other. But yeah, it seems as though that my family, for the most part, has done some type of service my whole life. So yeah.
That is amazing. You are also a veteran. You were a U.S. Marine for 4 years prior to becoming a police officer.
Correct.
Tell us a bit about that. And did that, well, I guess I'm assuming it was more your family that influenced you to become a police officer, but how does the Marines affect your decision to become a police officer? Or
well, actually, at a very young age, I knew what I wanted to do. So I was a police cadet when I was 15 years old in the town that I grew up in. And I used to work alongside and do ride-alongs with the officers there. And so I used to say, I'm going to be a cop when I grow up. Well, I'm gonna go through school and I'm going to be a cop. And so so one of the officers told me, he's like, if you want to be a cop, don't bother. This was back in the 70s. So he's like, don't bother going to college. Go into the Marine Corps, get into military police, get some training, and then get out, and then you can be a cop. And so I thought that was a good idea anyway, because my family, or the majority of my family, were all Marines anyway. So my grandfathers and uncles, and so it's made perfect sense to go into Marine Corps. So I joined the Marine Corps in 1976, and right out of high school, and followed my dream. Really, I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, got out, and worked towards becoming a police officer almost immediately after my 4 years. So yeah, it was good.
Okay, not on the list here, but what about it? Why do you think you wanted to be a police officer? What was the attraction as a little kid, or is it
Yeah,
this just a
yeah.
calling?
Ever since I was a little boy. Yeah, I always wanted. I mean, because I wasn't old. My grandfather, who was the police chief, he died before I was born. So I didn't really know him. But because my dad was in the fire service and my uncles were cops and all that stuff, I just felt as though that it was just a natural thing to do. Uh, so um, I always leaned towards the law enforcement side instead of the firefighter side for whatever reason. I have no idea. But ever since I was a young boy, I knew what I wanted to do.
That's pretty awesome. Okay, well, my hope is that police officers will share what's happening in their communities, what they're doing to bring about positive change, to bridge a gap between law enforcement and their communities. And I know that's going to differ by, I guess, urgency, depending on the community.
Yeah.
Um, so, but can you, and I'm also hoping that as other officers watch, as officers watch other interviewees in the series, that perhaps they'll be encouraged and inspired too for their own communities. So can you tell us a little bit about like what you're doing in your community to reach youth, to bridge the gap with your community, to share a little bit ideas?
Sure. I mean, when I was chief, I kind of wore a lot of hats. It was a small agency, I was the dare officer also when I was the chief. So
Mhm.
I got to know. I was in the middle school all the time, just walking the halls and talking to the kids and the parents. I thought was really important. Uh, And so when I was teaching DARE, I thought that that was super important. Even if the curriculum didn't get through all the way with the kids, the relationship to me was more important than the curriculum. Of course, the curriculum was very important. But for me, what was more important was the fact that we were building a relationship between law enforcement and kids who are now all adults now. And I hope that I was a good ambassador, I guess you could say, between law enforcement and young kids who are now adults. So that's way back. Today, it's way different. Um, with all of the problems, it seems as though we're constantly trying to reach out. I think that we're trying to be more transparent more than ever before. I've seen so many changes in the last 38 years in law enforcement, and one of them is technology and being able to reach out to the community either by social media and meeting with more people now more than ever is really important. So I think those are the biggies, is that keeping that communication line open between law enforcement and the community. It just so happens that the two communities that I have worked in the last my whole career, the town of Stafford and the town of Barrington, they have always been big supporters of law enforcement. So it would made our job kind of easy. We were very, very fortunate, or I was very, very fortunate to work in these communities all these years. But we're constantly trying to find ways to reach them more and sit down with people and communicate more. So I think communication is always the biggest issue. If you have a breakdown in communication, then there's a breakdown in relationships, and vice versa. If you have a good relationship with them, it's most likely because you have good communication with them.
Okay, so how do you facilitate that now? And what does a day in the life in your life look like right now as a law enforcement officer?
Well, the thing is that it's getting to know your community. And I mean, when you're on patrol, this is what I love to do. And I'm trying to teach the younger guys the same thing, is when you're just on patrol, just riding around in neighborhoods, and you see people out shoveling or raking leaves or getting ready for spring, whatever they may be doing in their yards, you pull over and stop, and you get out of your car and you approach them, you talk to them about anything and everything. And so you want to plant that seed, with these people, that, oh, you know what, these guys or these gals are they're decent people. They're people like us. So I think that's the most important, is just going out, shaking hands, almost. I hate this comparison, but almost like politicians, is going out and reaching your community face to face, one on one, two on one, whatever the case may be, and let them know who you are, and show them what type of a person you are. So that I love to do that. I just love to just drive through a small residential neighborhood and see people walking or doing something in their yard, and I'll just stop and get out of my car and just talk to them for no reason, just to chat. So
That's pretty radical.
yeah, well, it's effective, and the fact is that they love it, and so do I.
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. So how do you like, you were retired? I've never heard of anyone making it up to chief, retiring after 20 years, and then they're back. That's kind of
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Why?
Well,
How?
the thing is that after I retired, um, I tried retirement for like 3 months, and I tried to do a couple of small jobs, and I hated it. The jobs themselves were not bad. It's just I was away from where I felt comfortable, and so it was just a short time after I had retired. The then chief of police in Barrington had reached out to me and said, "Would you come? Would you come back as a patrol officer, bottom of the totem pole, um, and teach my people, teach them?" Because I had the perspective of going up through the ranks as a patrolman, and then to the chief, and then teaching these guys, um, the very basics, but from an administrative point of view. Like, for example, an officer would be complaining about something internal, and I have the perspective of both the patrol side and the administrative side. So I would counsel a little bit. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Now, there's things that you don't understand, that the higher echelon people are making decisions, and this is probably why they're making these decisions. And so once you explain it to the frontline patrol officers, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. All right, now I understand. So it was just bringing information to these young officers, um, and I really enjoyed it. I still liked patrol. I still liked coming in contact with the community, but really my main job was to just walk alongside the patrol officers and some sergeants, lieutenants, people who just needed some advice in certain areas, and they always knew that they could call me or meet with me and discuss things, and they trusted me in that what we talked about was between them and I, and nobody else. So so it was good. It was a good relationship. So and it's coming to an end, but I'll miss it, that's for sure. But I'm enjoying it now while it's still here. So
So it sounds like you're fulfilling the role of mentor and mediator, if you will.
yes, yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think you're going anywhere. I think you'll find a way to still be around.
Well, I've got a date. I have a date, Rachel, of July 1st.
Okay.
So we'll see. I'm gonna step out of patrol. And I'll still be an officer with the department because I'm a firearms instructor and stuff like that. So I'll probably stick around, but not in the patrol
Right.
status. That's all.
Maybe in the mentor mediator.
Could be, could be. I have a heart
Chaplain?
for I have a heart for the elderly too. So I would like to be the an officer that could reach out to the elderly community in our towns too. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I was raised by my grandparents, so I can appreciate that.
yeah.
So, okay. Let's see. What do you think are some of the contributing factors to the decline of respect for authority in our culture, specifically toward law enforcement?
Um, wow, that's a tough one. I mean, from what I see is that, you know, I have friends that are teachers, and they're going through the same thing that law enforcement's going through. So I don't know if it's the breakdown of the family, um, but something's going on where teachers are getting a lot of grief and disrespect, just like law enforcement is. I think for different reasons, but it's all in the same. It's all in the same pot because I will talk to some of my teacher friends, and they're explaining to me or describing to me experiences that we as law enforcement officers are going through. So, is there a quick answer? My quick answer would be the breakdown of the family unit. But I am not an expert by no means. But that's what I see. Yeah, that's what I see.
All right. This may or may not be an issue where you are. Many express fear of police officers, especially those of the Black community, in the last few years. Can you speak to that? Is that an issue for you
Well,
there?
so I've had this question asked to me just recently by someone else, and so I have to remind people that New Hampshire is only 4% non-white, so we're 96% white. So I very seldom have come in contact with um, in my duties, in the responsibilities of my duties as a patrol officer or whatever. Very few times. I mean, I probably less than 10 times in the last 38, 39 years that I've actually had one-on-one with someone other than that's white. So it's really difficult, and I'll tell you that of maybe the 10 times that I have had contact with someone who was not white, of all of them, there's only one that was really negative. Um, and I tried my darndest um, to approach in a a friendly way, but they were they did not want to listen to me. So, but overall, my experience with the few times that I've had with people who are not white have always been great experiences. I've never had an issue except for that one time. So, in that young man, he was an angry young man, and there was nothing that I could do to change his mind about his perception of who I was. So
How can civilians help restore respect for authority and specifically for law enforcement officers?
teach their children young. Teach their children young. Um, there's some things that parents do, they don't think, and it drives me crazy. And one of them is that if I'm working where there's large crowds, for example, I have had this happen more than one time, where the mom or the dad will say, "That's a police officer. If you do not mind and behave, I am going to come and get him, and he is going to arrest you." No, they could be saying this to a 5-year-old boy, and I get right, I step right into that. I'm like, no, 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 that is not my job. And so I'm like, do not tell your children that. Do not scare your children into thinking that they have to behave themselves, or else they're gonna get arrested. Their perception immediately is that they were afraid of cops. And it made me so angry. It's happened so many times. I correct the parent right in front of the child, and then I get down to the child's level and say, "Listen, buddy, listen, I am not going to arrest you. But if you're in trouble, I will save you, or I will help you, or I will protect you." But I don't understand why parents try to scare their children by using cops. And I don't get it. But I call the parent out when they do that. But yeah, I think that if they would show teach the respect to teachers, or to anybody in authority, as they grow older, they will automatically fall into line and have respect for law enforcement and for the military. And so, I mean, there's kids that I've dealt with over the years. They have no respect for authority because, quite frankly, their parents didn't have any respect for authority. So, which doesn't surprise me. So it is what it is. But if I had to tell young people today any advice, I would tell them, teach respect at home, to the elders, and then to teachers, and then law enforcement as they grow older. It starts at home.
Okay. Okay, I know some schools offer classes by police officers, but I'd like to see it happen nationwide. Your thoughts on that? It came up with our first interview about implementing a for credit class in middle and high schools, where officers come in and teach students, and students spend a specified amount of time with officers while they're on duty, as part of high school curriculum. I would love to see that happen. Like I said, math, English, and police officer.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? And do you know if anywhere in your community, if that's an option at this point?
No, but I'll tell you, the school resource officer, the average school resource officer plays that role a lot. I know one of our local school resource officers has done exactly what you just described. They implement things where she can get involved in with the high school kids, classes that she I'm not sure exactly what she teaches, but there is a connection there with the school resource officer. So I think school resource officers, especially in high schools, are very, very important, and I think that they will show that I think that they show, as long as they're a good resource officer, which I'm sure that they most are, if they show respect to the kids will respect him or her. So So yes, I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. But I think that we should use and utilize the school resource officer and expand their role. If they're not doing this, they should be.
Right. Well, I've been told some schools don't even have a school resource officer.
Yeah, it's that.
So it's sad. It's also seems crazy in the day and age we live in.
Right.
It seems reckless and irresponsible, actually. Is there a process in the police force, specifically in your precinct, to reach out or help or discipline a law enforcement officer who has changed in ways that negatively impact their ability to police effectively? Because the young man who, came in, years ago, maybe a different person years down the line, depending on whatever's happened in his life or for whatever reason.
Right.
Is there a way for you guys to address that, to reach out to an officer that's?
Well, first of all, let me say this, is that one thing that I really like about law enforcement is that law enforcement likes to police their own. They do not want a ugly duckling in their ranks. They don't want this person who is making them all look bad. When an officer, I'll just use my town as an example. So when a Barrington officer brings shame or brings negative publicity to the department, it's always the Barrington police. They may mention the individual officer, but the perception is that it's the Barrington police. So we all know and understand this. And so we like to police our own. We'll call people out and say, listen, if you're a racist, I don't want you to work with me. If you're this or that, if you are a little heavy-handed, I don't want to work with you. And so it gets to the point where these officers are forced out. I've seen that many times, although I will say that I have never met an open racist officer up here in New Hampshire. I'm not saying there isn't any. There's a bad egg in every dozen. So don't get me wrong. But I personally have never worked with a racist officer, and I'm so happy for that. It makes my job so much easier that I don't have to worry about something like that. But having said that, there are officers who should not be officers, and we like to call them guys out. Now, does it always work? No, but I think that it's gonna get better, or it's getting better, because now, especially the last couple of years or so, there has been new classes that the police academy has integrated into our yearly training. Ethics is just one of many that they're teaching every year. Every year, every officer has to take it. And so I see a difference already, and I think it's not going to get anything but better way after I am gone and retired. So I think that the state and the police academy itself is pointed in the right direction, and I'm sure that it will continue. Yeah.
Okay. Well, for the record, I do not believe that the wrong actions of a few define the police force.
Right.
I believe the few bad, like you say, need to be addressed, but I don't believe they defend them. And it breaks my heart when I see that, like you said, it's the whole police department that gets blamed for the bad actions of one. And
Sure.
that is very unfair and just untrue. It's not a true picture.
Right.
So I just want to go on record as saying that, I don't believe the hostility and anger in the nation by some because of the misdeeds of a few is unjust.
Right. I agree. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And, my goal is to shine a light on the many wonderful officers and open conversation,
Right.
and have people see you as I did with my Pastors and Pastors' Wives series, is see you as human in need of support and respect
Right.
and gratitude, and so that is part of my goal anyway. But along those lines, let's see, sounds like you guys sound like you are kind of on top of that, if you will, because we've seen, someone had asked what happens when an officer becomes a problem, or some departments so short that they just get a slap on the wrist and are allowed to continue. And that doesn't sound like it's an issue with you, but I know I've heard from others that, yeah, you are short,
Yeah.
very short.
Yeah.
And perhaps, I don't know, what do you think about that? Do you think it sounds from the stats I don't have them in front of me, that you're actually, it's a real problem. You're seriously short across the country, not necessarily in your district, on law enforcement. Do you
Yeah.
think that is a result of a hedonistic, self-serving society that doesn't want to serve, or do you think it's because of the bad press toward law enforcement officers in the last few years?
Well, I think that it's a part of it um, is that the bad press that we've gotten the last couple of years has taken its toll. And but there's other factors. People are looking, well, I'll give you an example of New Hampshire. They actually cut into our retirement system. So so the officers that are coming up through today are not getting the benefits that I am able to enjoy, because they're just slicing up the retirement system. So it's not making law enforcement as appealing as it used to. So now salaries have gone up, but just throwing money at a situation or a problem does not make it always go away. So I think there's a lot of things. I think that that's part of it, is that they're cutting benefits, the bad press, and the fact is the other thing is that it's hard to find good quality people that will fill the roles of law enforcement. I hate to say it, but man, some of the people who apply in this job, you do their background check and you're like, wow, I'm not even sure I would want to hire this person as a garbage man, let alone a police officer, because of their background. I mean, drugs is just, it's out of control. It's all of these things. You look at their backgrounds and you get scared. You don't want these people. You're like, I'd rather go shorthanded than to hire some of the people that are out there right now. So they have to weed them out. And I think that there's a good process for that. But hey, again, from time to time, you're going to get a bad apple in that process, and it's going to, go through and be hired somewhere. So,
Okay, well, I'm not a law enforcement officer, not called to that, highly respect it, but my personal feeling is that law enforcement officer, doctor, preacher, teacher, please do not do these as a job. Let it be a calling.
yeah.
And honestly, I mean, when we're talking about police officers and teachers and like pastors, missionaries, really seriously, I don't, we can compensate you for what you do, and we should compensate you well, but I don't think we can really pay you what you're worth ever.
Well, it's funny because I'll tell you that when my two boys got into law enforcement, I had conversation with them individually, and they're like, Dad, I want to be a cop. I'm gonna be a cop. And I'm like, okay, um, that's great. But you have seen, you have grown up, seen what my life is.
Mhm.
And if you're going to do this job for the money, then don't bother. It's
Right.
got to be a job where you love the job itself. You can't do it for the money. Number one, you're not going to get rich doing it. Number one, but number two, you have to love this job. The weird hours, the holidays, all of this stuff, the nights, weekends, all of that, it's it's still worth, if it's still worth it to you, then you've got it. When my boys talk to me about being a cop, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to try to talk you into it, but I'm not going to talk you out of it either. It's a decision that you have to make. um, but you're going to find out within the first year whether you really think you should be a cop or not. They both have been cops now for a minimum of 5 years. And one of them's on the SWAT team, loves the job immensely. So I think that they've got the bug. They realize that, yeah, this is not just a 40 hour a week, paying job that I bring home the money to raise my family. It's more to it than that. So if people get into law enforcement thinking it's just a job, they don't last. They don't last. They'll stick around for a couple of years and then move on. They just won't do it.
Okay. Um, well, I guess a good question to ask then is like, what, like, how long does it take to become a police officer in New Hampshire? Like, what are their requirements, vetting process? I
Yeah.
mean, I think prevention's
Yeah.
better than
So
cure, to weed people
right.
out
So
before they get in.
right. Yeah. So there is a pretty tough hiring process. A physical fitness test is usually the first thing that you do. If you don't pass the physical fitness test, which is the physical fitness test that you have to uh, pass to get into the police academy. And then of course, there's an extensive background check. There's a polygraph. There's, I think those are the two biggies. Is the polygraph and the background check. Um, and then we will hire them and we'll work with them anywhere from a couple of weeks to a few months before we send them to the police academy. So they're working shoulder to shoulder. Of course, they're not armed or anything like that. They're just following the lead of the officer that they've been assigned to, their field training officer. And we get them trained before they go to the academy, how to handle a gun in a safe manner, how to shoot, all of that stuff. And so by the time that they do go to the academy, they've already been with the department for a substantial period of time, where we already know what type of an officer he or she is going to be. And then we send them to the police academy for 16 weeks. It's a military style academy where you send them up there in Concord, the state capital, and they're there Monday through Friday, and then come home on the weekends, and then turn around and go back. Uh, and so they're 16 weeks, and then after they graduate from the academy, there is another 12 weeks of FTO or field training officer, where they're riding along with a field training officer and learning the ropes again that they did before they went to the academy, and then of course after. So 18 weeks, I'm sorry, 16 weeks at the academy, and then another 12 as field training. And then the field training officer is the one who determines whether they're going to be kicked loose on patrol on their own or not. They may require, another couple of weeks to work on a certain issue that they have. Or they may not pass the field training section and say, listen, you're not cutting it. It's not working out for you. You need to think of another career path. So, and they'll let them go. And some officers don't make it that far. They screw up, they make mistakes, and before they're actually a full-fledged police officer, they've done something that that they were terminated for. So that happens.
Well, that's a good place for that to happen, right?
Right,
Before-
exactly. Before
Oh.
they cause any damage.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, well, damage, okay. So why do you believe, I mean, why do you believe some cover for police officers that have gone bad when it endangers the community and the lives of the other innocent, faithful police officers? And what should be done about those who ignore warning signs? We're talking nation now, not your precinct.
Yeah.
We have instances where, an officer has several, incidents behind him, and it has to make national news and a tragedy before something's done about it. So
Right.
why is that? And what should be done about those that ignore the warning signs?
I wish there was an easy answer, Rachel. I can't get into the heads of these administrators who feel as though that it's okay to sweep stuff like that under the rug. I mean, I don't understand. I can't fathom why they would want to keep a bad cop around. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it's laziness or I don't know. It makes no sense to me. I would love to be able to ask them the same question, because I sit there and scratch my head and I hear about these officers that are making national news. And then, of course, their background comes out and you're like, why is this man or woman still a police officer? Why? I don't understand. So I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. I just, living up here in New Hampshire, I think we're kind of like protected a little bit because we do call these guys out. And they don't last. And it's so the bigger cities, I don't know if they just fall through the cracks. I don't know. I don't know. I really I can't tell you.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to hear how you feel about that.
Yeah.
So as far as your own personal convictions, curious, do you officers in your precinct in New Hampshire generally, do they use body cams?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I was saying earlier that technology is unbelievable today than it was 39, 38 years ago. We wear body cam. Departments now either have body cameras or they have cruiser cameras. Some have both, and some have one or the other. So I like the body camera. For an old guy, the technology, some of the technology anyway, I think is great. Body cameras are fantastic because it holds the officer accountable, number one, and number two, it will save your butt. I just recently, my body camera saved me from a citizen's complaint, and their accusation against me was totally false, and the body camera proved that. And it saved my reputation. No, at this point, I don't care about my career, but it's my reputation, not only as a police officer, but as a Christian police officer. My reputation means a lot to me. So I was very thankful and very grateful for the body camera. So, and I think that most of the young kids now, they just accept it as it's just another tool. But for us older guys, it's been a little more difficult to implement, not because we don't want it, but because it's just one more piece of technology that we've got to figure out. So,
I understand.
yeah,
Technology is great if you know what you're doing.
correct.
And
Yes.
I'm usually lost and begging
Yes,
for
so am
help.
I.
So, what are some of the hardest things you deal with as a law enforcement officer? Um, what are your current concerns for your community? What breaks your heart? What keeps you going?
Um, child sexual assault. Every time we turn around,
Wow.
there's another child being sexually molested. That's number one. Number two, drug overdoses. We have drug overdoses every day. And the third thing is suicide, the suicide rate. I have seen the suicide rate where we were covering 2 to 3 suicides a week. And it's not all, I mean, it's young people and it's middle age. I mean, young people meaning early teens, right up into their mid to late 30s. And of course, the pandemic certainly ratcheted a lot of that up. People feel alone, and I, it's the last 2 years. The suicide rate or attempted suicide is just crazy. It's just beyond something that I would have ever imagined 30 plus years ago.
Right. Small place there to be dealing with that much of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so how do you detach a bit, refresh, rest, and recover after a day when you've seen and heard things like you just mentioned that you'd rather not have encountered?
Well, I handle it differently now than back a few years ago. I can remember coming home um, from work and literally going into the bedroom and closing the door and just being alone for half hour, 45 minutes, just to unwind. I didn't want to be interrupted, and my wife respected that, and she kept the kids away during that short period of time, so that I could just unwind and decompress, and then I'd come out of the bedroom and I'd be okay. So I just needed that time from not every day, but from time to time. Today it's more. I talk about it more. I talk with my wife. I talk about it a lot, and of course, my my faith gives me strength. If it wasn't for my faith, I have said many times, I don't understand how anybody can be a police officer and not be a Christian man or woman. I don't know what I would do without my faith doing this job all of these years. And I thank God that my two boys who are law enforcement officers are also believers in Jesus, and uh, they have wonderful wives who support them and who make sure that they're being fed spiritually as well. So um, I have over the years adapted to more spiritual things, and it's really saved me because I know that there have been times where I have experienced a little post-traumatic stress. I'm not saying I have post-traumatic stress disorder, but I have had post traumatic stress. So, um, and it's my family, my wife, and my faith in Jesus that gives me comfort.
That's awesome. Yes. How does your career, how does it affect, well, how does it affect your family? I guess, as in the case of, I guess I'm more asking because of your wife, apparently with your sons, it turned them into police officers. So,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
so, so what's the impact on your wife, the police officer's wife, and how can citizens in our government better support our law enforcement officers and their families? Because
Well, I, we belong. We've been very fortunate that we belong, my wife and I, for a very long time, to a organization called Christian Law Enforcement Officers, um, and it's in New Hampshire and Maine, and we get together on a semi-regular basis, and as families, not just as officers, but as families, and it is the coolest thing. I mean, it seems to grow every year with all the kids running around, but that's certainly a huge thing for that we support one another. As far as the community supporting, you know, just if you, I think that it comes back to the respect thing. And I know that this is kind of a broken record for some people, but just we're people. We're just people doing a specific job that we were hired to do, enforce the laws in ordinances in our communities, and if they would just understand that it's not personal. If I pull you over for speeding, it's not personal. If I have to arrest you for beating your wife, even that is not personal. I'm doing what my job uh, requires me to do, and to just support and understand that we have this job. We have been given this job and this responsibility, and we just understand that that's what we just we want you to understand, that it's not personal. This is just the job that God has given us. Um, so yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it. Yeah.
is there a website or something for the organization, the Christian Law Enforcement Officers for New Hampshire and Maine?
I think so. Yeah. Clio, New Hampshire, Clio, Maine. Look it up. It's yes. See, Clio, CLEO.
Okay.
Clio, New Hampshire, Clio, Maine. Or Clio, Christian Law Enforcement Officers.org. I think. I can't
Okay.
remember.
Well,
I
perhaps
don't
if
know.
you
I'm gonna
can send
say
it to me, I'll include it in the post.
okay.
If you,
All right,
for those that are in the area. And
sure.
are you aware that the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association hosts retreats and seminars for law enforcement officers and their families for free? And that it also training police chaplains also?
No, I did not know that. Where?
Um, that I do not have right in front of me. I think they take place, the retreats are different places.
Okay.
We've had them at different places, and I believe they've
Okay.
had some of the events I believe have been at the Cove, but the retreats have been in different locations.
Well, that's
But
what
it's
this.
on their website, and it will be, I will send you that, and it will be
Okay.
in the post. It's
Good.
already.
Yeah, that's what Cleo. We meet at a Christian camp up in Maine. And I know that there's another one in upstate New York. We've been invited to that. We've never gone to it, but it's at I can't remember the name of the town off the top of my head, but uh, um, it's at a Christian college in upstate New York. Well, anyway, yeah. So I know that there's there are some places that do that. I mean, it's not attached to Billy Graham, but
Right.
there's some good resources out there. Yeah.
Okay. Also on the site, I'm looking for, let's see, where I might have the website up on my site. They also, some of the past seminars are available online to watch on replay. So,
Okay.
Let's see. All right, I will get that up. Not in this post, but if you go to the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, it's on their website where you can click over to it. They also have a 24-hour prayer line, which may be useful
Okay.
to lots of people. And that is 888-388-2683. So, and that's kind of nice because with a lot of the help out there, sometimes it's not available 24 hours. So it's nice that
Right.
that is. So I'm just looking to see where I have tucked that, but it will be on my site anyways. So, okay. So what is your favorite thing about being in law enforcement? Any favorite stories, miracle stories?
Miracle stories. I think the one that comes to my mind right off the bat is delivering a baby, a little boy, many years ago. That's probably the top of the list. And there's some stories of humor with other officers. There's I'll tell you a really cool story, one real quick. With actually with another officer that you will be interviewing. Him and I were patrol partners, and we went to a domestic type situation between a man and a woman. And when we got there, we diffused the situation, and we happened to be standing there talking. And I looked down, and there was a book, and I don't remember the book, but it was a Christian author. It's a Christian book, and I picked it up, and I'm like, "Ah, are you reading this book?" And they said, "Yeah, we are." Well, that started because it's really, we have to be very careful as Christians what we can and can't say about our religion or about our beliefs. But if I always look for a way to get it in, and this was one of them. And so I'm like, oh, you know what? It just so happens I've read this book. And so we start talking about the book. Well, next thing you know, we're praying with this couple. Now we have to take the husband to jail. We had no choice. There was a crime that was committed. But I really felt good. I mean, about the whole situation, that I knew that somehow God was going to work this out. And he did. So, and you know, long term. So, stuff like that really is I love to see it. It's amazing for me to see it. And it's things that I will never forget about my job. Never. How God has worked. So, yeah. So that's definitely cool.
Okay, so squeezing Jesus in there. No need for that here.
Right.
So, would you like to share how you became a Christian? Give us Jesus.
Yeah. So, I was in the Marine Corps, actually. I was stationed in North Carolina at the time. I was almost done with my 4-year hitch, and I'm sitting on a bunk. Now we're talking 1979, I think, and I'm laying on my bunk. Day off, I think it was a weekend, and I was reading a book by Hal Lindsey. I don't know if you've ever heard of Hal Lindsey or not, but he wrote the late great Planet
Planet
Earth.
Earth. Yep.
Yeah. And so I was literally reading that book. I was not a Christian, but I was reading this book, and across the room, across the squad bay, now you're talking about a squad bay of 80 Marines. And across the squad bay from me, there was this young man from the inner city of Philadelphia, got a Bible in his hand, and he's just preaching. I mean, I'm sure today that this man is a preacher. I have no doubt. And so he's preaching. He's preaching, and he's got 3 or 4 people standing there in front of him listening to him. And he turns and looks at me and says, "Come over here. You need to come over here and listen to this." And I did. And the man, the man was moving. He was a young man, probably in his early 20s, I would guess. And he was preaching the word, and I got saved right then and there. And my life was never, I mean, I was always wondering, because obviously I was reading Hal Lindsey's book, so I was searching, but the answer was right there in the same room with me. And it was really cool. So I accepted the Lord right then and there. And it just took off. I mean, I never looked back. It just was an amazing time and time again. I can't even tell you how many times that I can look back in my life and in my career and say, God was there for me, that he was there with me. He was there to guide me and to protect me. And like I said, I don't know how anybody can do this job and not be a Christian. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I think that with all of the things that we come across, that there has to be a bigger answer than what what the media and what everybody's people teach us today. So yeah, and so I found a wonderful wife who was a believer in Jesus, um, and we've never looked back. And time again, we raised our children, who, thank God, by the grace of God, have all accepted him and follow him. And that's probably the greatest gift of all, is that our children are following the Lord. So yeah, so that's it in a nutshell. I mean, there's so many things in my career where I look back and I'm like, that was a God thing. That was a God thing. So
As we close, do you have a message you'd like to share with your community, with America?
well, I guess for speaking for the for officers, would be, we're doing the best that we can. Do we make mistakes? Yeah, we do. And usually when we make mistakes, we're probably harder on ourselves than anybody could be, uh, on us. But we want to do a good job. We got into this career wanting to do good. And I just pray and hope that people would understand the fact that we're not perfect, but we want to be. We want to be perfect. And that if you would just not automatically assume something negative or something bad, hear the full story of something that happened instead of watching a 30-second clip of a body cam and making a decision that this officer screwed up really bad, because a lot of times a 30-second clip on a body cam tells you nothing. It gives you a very small window of something that happened. And that's what I hate about the media today, is that they manipulate these things and to make the cops look good or bad. I mean, sometimes they do it to make cops look good, and so it's both, goes both ways. But get the whole, before you judge, get the entire story of what's going on. Because I guarantee you, the officers that are involved, the vast majority of the officers here in this country want to do the right thing.
Amen.
And we don't care, as law enforcement officers, we don't care what color your skin is. We don't care what your religion is. We don't care if you were rich or poor. We want to serve you the same way we would serve anybody else and give you the same respect, and hopefully that we would get it back.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, know that I'm praying for you, law enforcement officers, and our
Thank
church
you.
prays for you.
Thank you.
It's actually, I didn't even remember till a couple of days ago that it was probably over 20 years ago when I started like specifically praying for law enforcement officers. And so it's, to do this series was on my heart for a few years before all hell broke loose.
Right.
It's kind of interesting to look back and go, wait a minute. So I'm praying it's been a blessing to you, and that your words I know will bless others and instruct, enlighten, and hopefully inspire others to support you and pray for you.
Right.
Those
Thank
that
you.
are praying. So,
Thank you so much.
but thank you for being with us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you for your faithfulness in serving your community and being an example to other officers too. Appreciate it. And also thank you out there to all our other law enforcement officers who are faithfully performing your duties. And thank you for all of those that are listening in. I'd like to invite you to check out my website, tattooinyourheart.com, subscribe for updates. Keep up with the series. Everyone out there, hearing from our law enforcement officers. The goal is at least one from every state. I also have hosted interviews with pastors' wives, and teachers, those who serve. I have a heart for those that serve in tough places and hope to help uplift them a bit.
Right.
And also host a variety of articles to inspire faith, encourage, motivate, connect cultures, questions with Christianity's answers. So, and also you follow my journey as I put together articles and such on integration of Oak Ridge, trying to bridge the gap there in our nation where there isn't, inform people. So God bless you all. Thank you for watching, listening, however you're ingesting your media, and I hope to see you again. Until next time. Thank you, Chief Young, and this is Rachel M. Colby inviting you to tattooitonyourheart.com. God bless you.